Why was Ivan so terrible? Ivan the Terrible. Yes, there are, I mean, he is regarded as one of the most terrifying kings that Russia ever had. So, first of all, Ivan the Terrible, he lived in the 16th century, okay, in the middle of the 16th century. Now, he was the first Russian king to call himself a Tsar. Before him, Russian kings were called grand princes. But Ivan the Terrible called himself the Tsar. And that's how this title of Tsar took root in Russia. And then you had a lineage of Tsars and Tsarinas. So, what does Tsar mean? Tsar is the Russian form of Caesar, Kaiser. Yeah. So, Ivan the Terrible, he was called Grozny in Russian. And Grozny kind of means terrible. It also means awesome, awe-inspiring, that sort of thing. Formidable, scary. So it kind of means that. That's what the word Grozny means in Russian. It doesn't necessarily mean cruel. It means scary, frightening, awe-inspiring, formidable, that sort of thing. Now, why is Ivan called Ivan the Terrible? Like I said, he lived in the 16th century, 1530 to 50. He lived for what, 55 or so years, 54, 55 years, and then he died. So let's go back to the beginnings of Ivan the Terrible. When he was a small child, his dad died, his father died. His father died when he was about 3 years old. And 5 years later, when Ivan was about 8 years old, his mother died. And she was most likely poisoned by various noble families who were competing for power in Russia. Okay? And Ivan had this brother. I don't remember his name, but he was deaf and mute. And Ivan and his little brother, they were treated as political football by the competing royal noble families in Russia who wanted to be the power behind the throne. And Ivan and his brother were neglected terribly when he was a child. They would be dressed in rags and they would be starving. They would not be given enough food and they would be given very poor clothes to wear. I mean, almost dressed in rags. So they were almost like street children. That's how they were treated. Okay. By these noble families. There were two major noble families in Russia at the time, and they were competing with each other and trying. They were trying to be the power behind the throne. But Ivan survived his childhood, and by the time he was 13, he had consolidated enough power to have one of the princes of one of the noble families executed during a feast. So during a feast, he accused that prince of mismanaging the rule of whatever region he was ruling, and he was then executed in a very brutal way. There are all kinds of stories about the execution. Maybe he was eaten by dogs or something, but most likely he was just beaten to death by the jailers. So that was the first show of independence of Ivan when he was 13 years old. And he formally became the Tsar of Russia when he was 16 years old. And he married this young lady whose name was what? What was Ivan the Terrible's wife's name? Alexandra, was it? Ivan the Terrible wife. Anastasia. Was it Anastasia? Anastasia Romanova, his first and most beloved wife. He had several wives, like it says, okay? But his beloved wife was his first wife, Anastasia Romanova. So once he becomes a Tsar, he ruled very nicely for a while. Okay, he implemented reforms and he had a nice, happy, loving, stable marriage, and he was fine. But because of his terrible childhood, he had this great distrust, this great mistrust of the nobility. He believed that they were after him, they wanted to kill him. Okay, so he always distrusted the military, the nobility, the nobility of his country. Then what happens is that he led the conquest of various parts of Russia. He expanded his empire. He went to the region of Kazan, Astrakhan. So the territories that belong to the Tatars. The Tatars are a Turkic origin ethnic group in Russia today, and they were the formidable enemies of the Russians when the Russian Empire was expanding, because it was expanding into Tatar territory. descendants of the Huns, yeah, Turks. So, Ivan conquered Kazan, he conquered Astrakhan down south, Crimea region. He expanded his territory, he expanded his empire, and he started slowly gaining this reputation as a warrior, a victorious, fearsome warrior king. Okay, and that's how this image starts, starts forming. That Ivan is Grozny, Ivan is terrible. Then he was fighting a war, the so-called Livonian War with Lithuania, and one of his close allies, who was again a noble, he defected to the other side, to the Lithuanian side, and he took command of a Lithuanian army and defeated the Russians. So that once again reminded Ivan that, you know what, the kind of childhood he had, and the nobles were always plotting and conspiring against him, and so this reinforced his mistrust of the nobles. So what Ivan did is that he abdicated the throne. He said, "I don't want to rule," and he gave up his throne and he gave the power to the boyars, which is a group of nobles and clergy, church people, priests. So he left Moscow. He went to a neighboring city, which is about, not very far away, but not close also. And he left the boyars to rule Russia. And it was almost impossible. They found it almost impossible to rule the country. It was really, really difficult. They could not make the decisions. And then they had to go to him and beg him to take the throne back. So he said, "Okay, I'll take the throne back on one condition. You let me rule whichever way I want to rule, and whoever I consider to be traitors of and enemies of the nation, you let me deal with them in whatever way I want." So they gave him this right, this permission. Okay. And that's when he divides the country into into two territories. One was a territory which would be administered by the nobility, and the other territory would be administered only by him. It was called the Oprichnina. Okay. So he created the Oprichnina, and he created a secret police called the Oprichniki. They would be dressed in black. They had some connection with the church, and they reported only to him. They were loyal to him, and he used the Oprichniki, the secret police, to unleash a reign of terror in this region called the Oprichnina. And he went after any and every person he considered to be a traitor or to be disloyal to him. So the secret police, it tortured and killed thousands, maybe tens of thousands of people. Okay, it was a kind of a terror apparatus. It was like the Gestapo, you could say. Yeah. And they took the land of people who were considered to be traitors, who were suspected of being traitors, suspected of being disloyal, and those people and their families would be killed off in the most horrific of ways. Okay, torture was common. People would be burned alive, and let's not go into the details. So it was just absolute terror. Okay, so that's in the 1560s, and then there was this city northwest of Moscow, near St. Petersburg. It is called Novgorod. Okay, it was the second largest city in Russia, and it was considered to be a rival of Moscow. And Peter was deeply suspicious of the people of Novgorod. He believed that they were not loyal to him, they were traitors. So he attacked Novgorod, besieged the city, conquered it, sacked it, and there were mass executions, horrific atrocities. 10 to 15,000 people were killed off. Okay, monasteries were destroyed, churches were destroyed, the priests and monks, etc., were killed, merchants were killed, politicians and nobles were killed. Essentially, it was merciless cruelty, and he essentially destroyed the city of Novgorod. It did not recover for centuries, because of what he did. So that reinforced his reputation of being a very vicious, cruel ruler, and he started descending into this mental instability after his wife died. So he was very fond of his first wife, Anastasia Romanova. Okay, And after she died, that stabilizing and moderating influence in his life was gone. And then he married multiple ladies. Some he married for like less than a year or whatever. I think six or eight. I don't know what the actual number is, but a large number of ladies he married. But he became mentally unstable. He became deeply, deeply paranoid, and he went on this long, decades-long rampage against anybody who he considered to be disloyal. Eventually, you see, he created this police secret service force, right, called the Oprichniki. Eventually, he started suspecting that the Oprichniki were potentially plotting against him. So he disbanded the Oprichniki and had many of them also executed. Okay, so that's how it was. That's how he was super paranoid. And near the end of his life, when he was probably in his early 50s, around 50, um, he had a couple of sons, maybe more than a couple of sons, at least two sons he had. And one of his sons, who was the crown prince, he was married, his wife was pregnant, and in the palace, Ivan happened to meet his son's wife, and apparently she was not dressed properly enough or something. She was heavily pregnant, and he beat her up. He beat her so badly that she miscarried. So his son, the crown prince, came and confronted his father. How dare you do this to my wife, to your own daughter-in-law? And Ivan, he was carrying some kind of staff. He hit his son on the head with the staff, and that ended up killing his son. So he had his daughter-in-law miscarry, his own grandchild, and then he killed his own son. And there is this extremely famous painting of Ivan. Let's see that. Ivan the Terrible and his son, right? Safe search. Yeah, because it is not a nice image to see. So there we have it. You can, if you want, you can look into it in greater detail. This is when he realizes what he has done to his son. So he was just mentally unstable at this point in life, and he died in his mid 50s or something. So that was a deal about Ivan. He started off as a reasonably good king. As long as he was married to his first wife, he was fine. He ruled well. He had a terrible childhood. In his childhood, because he was so powerless, it is said that he would torture animals, throw dogs and cats off the roof, and pluck the feathers of birds, that sort of thing. So, because of his extremely traumatic childhood, he became cruel. He was fine as long as his wife was alive, but afterwards, after she died, and possibly she was also poisoned. His mother was poisoned. His wife was also poisoned. There were exhumations of the bodies of his mother and wife in the 20th or 21st centuries, whatever, and poison was most likely detected in the bones. So his mother was poisoned. Eventually his wife was also poisoned. He became extremely paranoid, and he went after anybody he suspected was disloyal or a traitor. He had lots and tens of thousands of people tortured, killed in terrible ways, and what he did to his own family was also brutal. So that's why he is called Ivan the Terrible. Hope that explains this.